Okay, so tonight is the 10 Commandments, and we're going to cover all of them except the 6th and the 9th, because those are going to be covered next week. And next week's going to be a Theology of the Body talk by Father Mark, and he's going to weave in the 6th commandment, which is, thou shalt not commit adultery, and the 9th commandment, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's spouse, or thy neighbor's wife, or husband. So, those two commandments you'll hit next week, but tonight we'll pretty much get through all the others, I believe. And, you know, for me, the 10 Commandments are like the classic thing that I remember from a catechism when I was 8, you know? It's like, it's funny, like I just remember learning them, and you know, this huge poster board of the 10 Commandments and everything like that. And so it's kind of fun to like actually be teaching the 10 Commandments for like the first time in my life. Now as a priest, like kind of like systematically, or kind of just going through them. So, but I would say now, the thing that's kind of like from my childhood experience, like going to catechism class. But the most memorable thing that I've learned, and just what I think about the 10 Commandments now, is that, I'm just going to read it from the catechism, because it puts it better than I can. And this goes for all of our moral life. So these sections now in RCIA are in the moral life. And here it says in the catechism, the commandments then make explicit the response of love that man is called to give to his God. And so the entire moral life that we live, trying to do good and avoid evil, is a response to God. And it's like very, very important that that is the way we think about all of morality, right? Is that it is a response. God has moved towards us in his revelation. And so God has first loved us, as St. John writes in his first letter. And so I would say that that's the impression that the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about, like, what are the 10 Commandments? What are they for me? It's like God is telling me, this is how you make your response to me. This is how I've come to you, and I've shown you this is how you return to me. So that's just kind of the first thing I want to get off. It's on my mind. But we will begin with Jesus, as we always should. Right? Jesus shows us how to read the entire Bible. He is the key. This comes from Matthew 19. Teacher, what good deed must I do to have eternal life? And Jesus said to him, cheer for the Green Bay Packers. No, not really. That might be a different version of the Bible. If you would enter life, keep the commandments. He said to him, which? Jesus said, you shall not kill, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, honor your father and mother. The Lord did not come to remove the commandments, to take them away. Here he says, if you would enter life, keep them, keep the commandments. I have not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it, Jesus says elsewhere in the Sermon on the Mount. And down below, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. So that's kind of a big one for priests, I would say. It can be easy to start to want to give, oh, don't worry about that, like, just it's okay. But actually Christ is calling us, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But we'll move along here. Here we go. Like I mentioned, the 10 Commandments belong to God's revelation, right? His movement towards us. Right? Now, the 10 Commandments, however, could be found, similarities could be found in many other traditions. Right? C.S. Lewis is well known for, in his, I think it's his book, Abolition of Man, or Mere Christianity. He tries to talk about the similarities between the Ten Commandments and many, many other traditions that are out there, religious traditions. So at the same time that they are revelation, they are an expression of the natural law, the law that is written on our hearts. Okay? Every human being is called to honor their father and mother. That is a part of the natural law. And so we kind of have a crossover, you know, between revelation and natural law. Okay. Since they express man's fundamental duties towards God and towards his neighbor, the Ten Commandments reveal grave obligation. No one can dispense from them. So that's why we got to go over that. This is important. This is how we make our response to God. This is how we love him back. Now, Jesus acknowledged the Decalogue, but he didn't remain there. He preached a righteousness which exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, as well as of the Gentiles. He unfolded all the demands of the commandments. You have heard that it was said to the men of old, "You shall not kill." But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be liable to judgment. All right. And you often hear the term old law and new law, especially from St. Paul. Right? The old law, it gave the law, right? But it did not give the power to fulfill the law. And that comes from Christ. And Christ also deepens the meaning of the law. And he raises it up to a much more spiritual level, right? There's nowhere in the Old Testament that you can find anything about committing adultery in your heart, right? But Jesus says, right, whoever looks at a woman with lust has committed adultery in his heart. Right? So he's not abolishing the sixth commandment, but he's raising it, right, to a deeper level, to the interior level. He's getting to the meaning of the law. Right? You have heard that it was said to men of old, but I say to you, right? Jesus, I say to you, you shall not even be angry with your brother. Right? Now, he fulfills the law, he even raises it to a new plane, but then he gives us the power to fulfill it. So, which is the greatest commandment? And he said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets. So the entire law depends on those two commandments. And so we'll see that following the Ten Commandments, even the sins against the various commandments are always a failure in love. And if we get love right, a lot of other things go right. A lot of other things fall into place. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and all your soul, and all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. Okay. So the Ten Commandments, does anyone know where you find them in the Bible? Throw it out there if you've got a guess. Go for it.
Is it Exodus?
Yep. What chapter in Exodus? Anyone know? Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5. Okay. And there's slightly different versions. But obviously Exodus is, you guys seen the Ten Commandments at Easter time on ABC. It's like my dad's favorite movie every year. It goes, everyone's seen it, right? Who has not seen that? Oh boy. All right. This year, well, actually this year you guys might be busy at Easter, but it's awesome. It's epic. And yeah, the Ten Commandments are given.
RCIA movie night.
Yeah. We should do it. Yeah, the Ten Commandments are given to Moses, right?
You have to do it in a couple parts. It's a long movie.
It's so long, that's right.
I mean,
It's actually been quite a few years since I've seen it.
if time's a constraint, you could show Prince of Egypt instead.
It's been even longer since I've seen that. Is that about Moses? Yeah. Okay. So the Ten Commandments, typically divided up into the first tablet, the second tablet, right? The first pertains to love of God, the first 3, and the last 7 to love of neighbor. Okay. The first commandment: you shall have no gods before me. Now, I'm not sure where Father Mark gets all his artwork, but I'm pretty sure that's Poseidon or something. Maybe anything else. But anyways, you shall have no gods before me. When we say, no one can serve 2 masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. How often do we actually think about the first commandment? How often do we actually, we have an examination of conscience once in a while. It's like, all right, have I been, mean to this person, or have I gossiped? Have I, been lustful? Blah blah blah. We have these sins. But has God been God for me? Right? If I put other gods in front of Him, it might not be immediately obvious because we're not surrounded by tons of other gods, at least explicitly, like there would be in other historical time periods. But there's plenty of other things out there. I mean, every time I come down State Street, I'm like praying the rosary, and I'm like going by like the Buddhas and like the salt, the crystals, like all these things. I was like praying as I go by, and like blessing things. Because I mean, it's not like there's a lot of spiritualities out there, a lot of things. So we actually have to think about the first commandment: you shall have no gods before me, and that is the greatest commandment and the first one. So these are the sins against the first commandment. And these get kind of fun. They just like some fun names for stuff. Okay, idolatry. Whenever one honors or reveres a creature in place of God, whether this be gods or demons, power, pleasure, race, ancestors, state, money. Can you think of anything else that could become an idol?
Your iPhone.
Girlfriend. Money.
There you go. That's I was kind of going with. I was trying to think of Anthony's. Like, yeah, money's definitely like people, right? I don't know. Like the whole paparazzi thing. Like people can really become idols for us, right? It's easy to just become infatuated. And I lost my train of thought. Something to say. Maybe it'll come back to me. Superstition attributes importance in some way to magical to practice otherwise lawful. Efficacy of prayers or of sacramental signs to their mere external performance apart from the interior dispositions that they demand. Okay. So, of course, the sacraments do give grace, right? But they're not magic. We must approach the sacraments with faith and with the right disposition. So, yeah, superstition. I mean, I've knocked on wood before. I don't think it's a huge sin, but maybe if you really relied on that, and if you looked around for a piece of wood to knock on because you didn't, you're going to be jinxed. Then you might be falling into superstition. I don't know. But I don't know. Can you think of any other superstitions that are just out there?
The black cat.
Black cat, yeah.
Step on a crack and you'll break your mother's back.
Yeah, but things that you might actually catch people believing, well, on the one hand, religious people sometimes think, if I pray to God, nothing bad will happen to me in this life.
Sure. Yeah.
You come across that a lot.
Maybe karma.
Karma.
Yeah, karma.
Yeah. And you know, I never, like, people, when people say karma to me, like, I'm like kind of slow to correct them because I'm like, I don't want to, like, you know, there's like some good there, right? Because we do want to have a fear of doing wrong, but the exact retribution, right? It's a limited view of God. I think karma doesn't see a very big picture of God, and probably, you know, the fact that bad things happen to good people, right? And how do we deal with that problem of evil, right? So karma. I mean, karma I think is from the Buddhist tradition, like the word karma.
Hindu, I think it's Hindu tradition.
Okay.
But
All right. It's not, I'm not sure. So. All right. Divination practices falsely supposed to unveil the future. All right. So. Yeah, more and more I think this is out there. I mean, I don't know if you guys probably know better than me. I was hunkered up in the seminary for a while, so you know, kind of like away from State Street. So tempting God, putting God's goodness or power to the test, right? Because God always wills what is good for us, always does. Sacrilege, profaning or treating unworthily of things consecrated to God. Okay, so like a black mass. There's been a few advertised in the past few years, right, where they take a consecrated host and they try to profane it, right, to make, to do something to it that is, I guess, I don't even know what they do with Black Mass, to be honest, but they desecrate the Eucharist. They take it away from its proper place, which is either on the altar or in your body or in the tabernacle, and do something else with it. All right, and simony, the buying or selling of spiritual things. Right, I think that we see that in the Acts of the Apostles. I won't go into it, but yeah. Any questions about those? Yeah.
Well, what is tempting God? I don't quite understand, like how I put God's goodness to the test.
I think it would be like so.
Well, it happens in movies a lot, right? When people make deals with God, when they're like about to die, they're like, God, I swear, if I don't die, I will serve you forever. And then they survive. They're like, maybe not.
Yeah, right. Yeah, putting a condition on God.
Maybe the condition of its existence. Like if you exist, then you do this.
Oh, yeah,
right.
Or if you exist, then you'll save me, or you know, something like that.
Asking for like a very, very specific sign from God. And Jesus said that an evil generation seeks a sign. Right? Not that God won't speak at times through signs, but to demand it, to say, I will not believe unless I receive a sign. Putting God's goodness or power to the test, right? You're holding up something against God Almighty. So your own desire to receive a sign or something, right? And it's a sin against faith. And a lot of these sins against the first commandment are sins against faith and love. Okay. Anything else? So buying or selling of spiritual things. So yeah, hopefully that doesn't happen. But
What about buying a crucifix? Is that the buying and selling of spiritual things?
good question.
Or a rosary?
Mhm.
I mean, I have a cross necklace on right now.
if it is blessed, so that's kind of the line. Because the person who made it deserves to be.
Right. Yeah. Out of justice, like we owe something to purchase a crucifix. I think that could be a good distinction. Maybe it's not a spiritual thing until it's blessed.
That's what I
But I don't know. Yeah. I mean,
Or for instance, like if you have a relic, you cannot sell the relic.
yeah.
And then of course, like a priest cannot withhold a sacrament.
Right. Primarily probably refers to the sacraments. So if you want to be baptized, right, you do not have to pay for that. Parishes, for weddings, it's usually like suggested donation, $250, right? But the keywords are suggested donation, and not we're selling this for money.
Maybe like indulgences?
First thing that came to mind for me was like buying like your forgiveness or something spiritual thing. Like that's what I thought right away. Like
Yeah, that's definitely a sin. If a priest were to withhold something that is your right to receive for money, I mean, the priest would commit simony. I'm thinking it'd be hard for most likely it's the priests who commit this sin. So. Is that kind of answer? I mean, buying a crucifix is definitely a matter of justice, and it's not a sin on either the behalf of the person who buys it or sells it. Now, sometimes I don't like to go into shops that do focus so much on like marketing and pushing to sell religious things. But there's some very, very holy, like religious stores that give you good holy religious objects, right? And we should have a crucifix. We should have a rosary, right? Because material things are important. We do need these to help us pray, to help us carry out our life. So yeah, that's not doesn't really fall under the sin. Okay. Second, keeping the Lord's name holy. The second commandment prescribes respect for the Lord's name. It governs our use of speech in sacred matters. You have heard that it was said, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not swear at all. Let what you say be simply yes or no. I think this one's pretty straightforward. Like, you can get, like for me, like, when I started to pray, it probably took like a year, when I was 19 or so. Probably took a year before I became like sensitive to this, because for people for many people, it is just common to just take the Lord's name in vain. Like I stub my toe and I use the Lord's name in vain, you know. But that is a sin. I mean, people might not always know it, and it takes time to kind of develop that. But the more you use Jesus' name in prayer, the more it becomes sacred. And the more powerful it becomes, and you never want to take it in vain, because you know that just His name has power. Right? Pope Francis often says just to pray Jesus, just to say His name, you know, over and over. And so His name is holy. There's a whole feast dedicated to the holy name of Jesus. And same thing with Mary's name. I mean, she probably doesn't fall under this commandment, but in the liturgy, at Mass, the priest will bow his head at the name of Jesus and Mary. So their names are holy. Yeah, I don't know, like saying Jeepers, like maybe that's okay, but it's probably a derivative of Jesus. Yeah. Okay, these are the sins. I should have gone right to it. Blasphemy consists in uttering against God, inwardly or outwardly. Ironically, this is what they condemn Jesus for. Words of hatred, reproach, or defiance, in speaking ill of God, in failing in respect towards Him in one's speech, in misusing God's name. Oaths which misuse God's name, though without the intention of blasphemy, show lack of respect for the Lord. The second commandment also forbids magical use of the divine name. Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm not an expert in spiritual things, but there are like spells and charms, and these exist out there, and it's definitely a sin to be involved in anything like that, right? Because it's pretty much, yeah, it's a sin against the second commandment, but more a sin against faith, right? That God knows me, loves me, will take care of me. I don't need to use shortcuts to seek answers, right? Okay, false oaths and perjury. When he makes a promise under oath with no intention of keeping it, or when after promising on oath he does not keep it. Perjury is a grave lack of respect for the Lord of all speech. Pledging oneself by oath to commit an evil deed is contrary to the holiness of the divine name. False oaths and perjury. Just, yeah, any questions on these? Like, I think blasphemy is probably like the one that's like, you know, if you're really angry against God, like, it can be a sin that you fall into, and even like St. Peter, after he denies Jesus, says like he doesn't say he sinned against God. He said like he invoked a curse on himself, and luckily he repented of that. But we know that Judas did not. Okay, third commandment, keeping the Lord's Day holy. Today is the Lord's Day. You guys are keeping it holy. You're here. You're at RCIA. That's awesome. And probably went to Mass today, too. So, that's how we keep the Lord's Day holy. The celebration of Sunday observes the moral commandment inscribed by nature in the human heart to render God an outward, visible, public, and regular worship as a sign of His universal beneficence to all. And so that's the Sunday obligation that we have, right? To attend Mass every Sunday. Okay. If we're if we're sick, if we're ill, we can't make it, or if we're on the way to church and somebody is like dying on the side of the road, you know, the obligation does not apply. Right? We have a duty first to do the best good all the time. But we must keep the Lord's Day holy. This is something that, you know, it's a mortal sin. It's a mortal sin. It cuts us off from God if we intentionally miss Mass on Sunday. Because it is the day that we celebrate the Lord's resurrection. It's what set Christians apart from the Jews, from Muslims, from any other religions, that we hold Sunday to be holy. And we gather together as a community. And yeah, this is, the early Christians would say, without Sunday, we cannot live our faith without Sunday. And I would say in our culture, it is a bit difficult to hold on to this. I mean, my niece is playing basketball on Sunday morning. Like, I went to the gym, like, the middle school gym parking lot is full of cars on Sunday morning. And like, I'm like, man, church parking lots aren't this full, you know? So it's gonna get harder. It's gonna get harder as you go along to keep Sunday holy. And you know, a lot of parishes have vigil masses. Yeah, question?
Oh, I was just gonna ask about like Saturday night mass. Like a lot of people substitute that. Is that?
It counts. I think it's suggested. Now, at my home parish, that's all we have because it's tiny. All we have is the 4 p.m. on Saturday. Now, but ideally, if you have a choice, you go to the Sunday Mass. The Vigil Mass is there, you know, if you need it. And I think it's actually recommended that you don't make a regular practice out of going to the Vigil Mass, right? Because it's allowed, but Sunday is the day of the resurrection. It's the day of Pentecost too. So, yep.
But if you have a wedding on Saturday, should you go to Mass on Sunday as well?
I think almost always, yes. I can't think of a time that the wedding on Saturday would satisfy the obligation.
Are the holy days of obligation the same like subject every year? Like is each day
Every
the
year.
same? You know what I mean? Not the same date, but the same principle behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some years so December 8th is a holy day of obligation, the Solemnity of the Immaculate Conception. Now some years December 8th will fall on Saturday, and the Bishops' Conference will decide that you can fulfill. You don't. They will take it off from being an obligation that year. So those things can be a little bit adjusted, but Holy Day of Obligation is just like a Sunday. We must go to Mass.
So January 1st this year was not because it was on a Monday.
Yeah, in some dioceses, right? I don't think in all of them.
Not in all of them, but some.
Yeah. So that can kind of be dependent on the diocese and what the bishop says. Okay. And the Lord's Day. I mean, it's the day that God himself rested on the seventh day from all the work he had done. The rhythm of work and rest. You know, it was kind of fun to see people working on Saturday in Italy. And maybe that's why they didn't work too hard the rest of the time. But you know, like they didn't have the mentality of like a 2-day weekend. It was just kind of like Sunday. They usually work Saturday morning to like noon or so. So I don't know, maybe I think in our culture, like we work super hard for 5 days and then we just like take this 2-day rest and then we're back at it. And you know, there is a natural rhythm to work and rest. Sometimes we're not able to have our ideal, but really the Lord's Day, it's worth working hard in order to enjoy the Lord's Day, right? All the other days of the week. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So it's for us. And it does say that all the other days man shall work. So how many days should you work? 6 days. How many days should you rest? 1 day. So it's kind of funny that the weekend is not really biblical. It really, but I mean, I would say sometimes we need 2 days of rest after 5 days of work. But God does say to work for 6 days. So. Okay, fourth commandment: honoring father and mother. We should honor our parents to whom we owe life. We are obliged to honor and respect all those to whom God, for our good, has vested with his authority. Okay. Okay, family ties are important but not absolute. And many people notice this in the gospel, especially like moms when they're reading, they're in the pews on Sunday and it's like Jesus is like saying, he who loves father and mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And Jesus has some strong sayings about the love of God being first before love of family. And some of that had to do with the culture that Jesus was in, right? He was in a Jewish culture. The family ties were very, very strong, right? And so he was kind of bending the stick, you could say, or kind of working against the cultural norm, which was maybe to put love of family before love of God. And so Jesus says, no, he who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. So that's why this is the fourth commandment and not the first commandment. Right? But we should honor our father and mother, definitely. We owe them a lot. And so I should call my mom more. I'm sorry. I really should. Okay. Yeah, anything about that? Honor the first commandment?
So what if someone asks you to do something that you don't think is right, but they're like in authority over you?
Yeah. Well, chances are you cannot follow what they're directing you to do unless it would cause a grave scandal. I don't know, can you give an example? Or like I don't know, Dad says like, no way, son, you're not going to be a priest. Or, you know, or you're out of the family. Or you can't marry that person or you're out of the family.
What about keeping a secret from extended family?
So,
Like something is happening in your immediate family and you don't tell grandparents or aunts and uncles. Like that kind of authority?
yeah, you need, so honor your father and mother.
Yeah.
Right?
And they tell you to lie or keep a secret.
Now, you can't lie, right? I mean, that's one of the, you should not bear false, that's like the 8th commandment. So,
We're not there yet.
yes, the more particular we get, the harder it gets, but, yeah, you must honor your father and mother, but you also cannot lie. Right? So if they're telling you to lie, you need to do whatever you can to go to them and say, this is what I cannot do, I cannot lie, right? And you have to work with them to prevent them. But to carry out a command, which is a sin, is not honoring your father and mother. You know, that is perhaps cooperating with evil. Right? If they're doing something evil and you're cooperating with it. So, yeah, I mean, and then you can just look like, well, Jesus says I need to love God more than my mom and dad. So there we go. I'm not gonna. You know, there's plenty of ways around that one. So, but it can probably be very difficult. Okay. Anything else? So 5th commandment, you shall not kill. But I say to you, everyone who is angry with his brother shall be liable to judgment. So again, 5th commandment is not just you shall not kill, but you shall not harbor thoughts against others, right? Right? We cannot hate others or be angry with others. Right? There is such a thing as like righteous anger, but it's not a very big reality. It's kind of small reality. Right? We want to love everyone as God loves them. Now, respect for the development of human life require peace. Peace is not merely the absence of war. Peace cannot be attained on earth without safeguarding the goods of persons, free communication among men, respect for the dignity of persons and peoples, and the assiduous practice of fraternity. Right? So with the dignity of every human person. Some people are easier to love than others. It's true, but we have to love everyone. You know, you've heard they've said an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Right? I remember going on a service trip. We were at this house, a recovery house. It was all sorts of young mothers, and they were, yeah, I mean, almost all of them were African American. They had very tough lives. They were recovering addicts, and all their children were like running around this house, and like a little boy punches a little boy, and mom says, if he punched you, you can punch him back. And so the little boys just like, they're like punching each other. This is like crazy. And the directors of the house were like, no, you cannot do this. You have to correct the moms. Like, and that's what Jesus is saying here. Like, this is not an eye for an eye or tooth for a tooth, right? But resisting evil by turning the other cheek. Right? There's a great, you can really get into this verse about what turning the other cheek means. But I can just say briefly, it's not being completely passive in the face of evil, right? But it's not, oh, you punch me, I'm going to punch you, right? So it's between those two, right? Turning the other cheek is being just to yourself, respecting yourself and your own dignity, but it's also not just lashing out at the other person. I wish I had time to go through that. Yeah.
Just a general question about like respect for life. So, as a pro-life you could say like stance, do we like prioritize like the unborn to like people who are struggling, you know, like the poor, you know, like
Yeah.
how does that look like if we're trying to like make a difference in like unborn children's lives or like the poor and marginalized?
Yep. Yeah, respect for life must be at all stages of life, right? So, and people are vulnerable when they're in the womb, when they are children, elderly, sick and poor, right? Those are the most vulnerable. So we have to protect the most vulnerable sort of first, right? And so it's really hard to say, if I have 10 resources, where do I put them to respect life the best, right? Do I give all my resources to the Women's Care Center? Do I give all my resources to the food pantry? You probably give some to both. You probably need to give to the most vulnerable and the most in danger first, right? So who is that? That depends on time and place. But the church is very adamant that the pro-life movement is protecting the most vulnerable, right? And why are there so many abortions? That's a big question, but well, there's sins against chastity usually. There's a lot of poverty. What else? You guys can chime in. Right. So it's not just, it's a complex thing. In order to respect life, we have to respect it at all stages, and especially going the most vulnerable first, I would say. That kind of helps.
Wouldn't like each person sort of have like a certain calling? Like if you were gonna say like, oh, I have like 10 hours a week or something to like devote, then I would like rather than trying to pick between like born or unborn, or like you would feel like a certain calling of like something you're passionate about or something you would be good at to like help out with.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Totally.
kind of like a charism, but like as a lay person.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Okay.
That sounds awesome. Yeah. So, murder, abortion, euthanasia, suicide, scandal. These are all sins against the fifth commandment. Yeah, euthanasia is getting a lot more attention these days. Because probably, I don't know why. I don't know if I know this answer, but I mean, more and more places are passing laws that allow it. So.
For my grandma, she passed away because of dementia, and at the end, it was just like a lot of people were kind of just questioning, like, because she was just in like immense pain and like everything. So I know that was one argument that came up while my family was like trying to figure out what the next steps were.
Yeah, and there's a whole moral class you can teach on this, and we don't need to use extreme measures to keep people alive at the end of their life. I mean, there is a natural way of dying, but to end life before it is reached its natural way of going is murder. Gravely contrary to the dignity of the human person. Same thing with suicide. Now, probably with our knowledge of mental illness, we know that those who commit suicide probably are unable to really sin. And we should really pray for those that have mental illness, they can get help. But it is a sin. It's just that the particular circumstances of it are very, very mitigating. Because in order to sin, you know that you must be aware that it is a sin, and you must fully consent, right? And so that consent is probably not there because something is blocking the will. Okay. Yeah.
Where's like the line drawn between like hating hateful people of like that have done terrible things? And
Yeah, I think this might kind of get
okay.
to it. So legitimate defense of persons and societies is not an exception to the prohibition against murder. As long as so this is kind of getting it. You might be thinking of like the death penalty.
Kind of, or like, you know, just like evil people that you think of just in general, of like Bin Laden or someone
Hitler,
like that.
sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so there's the general principle of you hate the sin and not the sinner, right? So you can never lose a view of one's dignity. It can be very, very hard to see the dignity of Bin Laden, Adolf Hitler, right? But we hope for their conversion, for their sincere repentance. You know. Yeah.
What about the death penalty?
So, I might just read it from here. I don't know if he gets to it. No. Okay. So, only in very, very, very grave circumstances can the death penalty be just. I might just get to that at the end, because I don't want to kind of mess it up. It's a little tricky. Bring about death waivers. But I know that John Paul II did reiterate that it's not to be a normal means for justice, only in grave circumstances if this person is, you know, a threat to any and every other person that they're around.
I mean, more or less, the death penalty is a means of societal self-defense, right? And so, in order to justly apply the death penalty, that person has to be an active threat to society. And so if the person can be detained in some way, then the death penalty is really not lawful.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. So the just war. So there's a lot of conditions that must be fulfilled for a war to take place. And ideally, there'd be a world without war. But if there is an unjust aggressor, it is possible that war can be undertaken in order to put down the aggressor. So here are the principles. So the damage inflicted by the aggressor must be lasting, grave, and certain. All their means of putting it to an end must have been shown to be impractical or ineffective. There must be serious prospects of success, and the use of arms must not produce evils and disorders greater than the evil to be eliminated. So, yeah, all four of these tend to get examined very deeply whenever there is a choice by a nation to undertake a war. But just so you know, there is a just war theory, and the church upholds it. Why? In order to take down unjust aggressors, which are threats to society.
And that doesn't mean that good Catholics don't disagree about some, like some person might say this is justified, and this person says, well, no, because they disagree about one of those things. Or lots of good Catholics debate whether or not capital punishment should be allowed in different states or different, in the United States. And a lot of them on either side have good arguments. So it's not as if it's not exactly black and white just by applying some theory. And obviously the church takes these things very seriously too, which is why you hear the Holy Father preaching about it, for example.
All right, the eighth commandment. The eighth commandment forbids misrepresenting the truth in our relations with others. This moral prescription flows from the vocation of the holy people to bear witness to their God, who is the truth and wills the truth. So, the wife is getting ready to go out, and she comes out to her husband. She says, "Oh, how do I look?" And the husband says, "You look great. You look great." Yeah. Maybe he's not sure about that. Is he telling a lie? Or little Johnny answers the phone. He's 5, and he goes, "Dad, it's for you." Dad says, "Tell him I'm not here. Tell him I'm not here." Then Johnny's like, "He's not here." Is he lying? I don't know. It's funny because we had this debate in my theology class, and like the Germans are like, "Oh my goodness, that's a lie. He can't do that." And the Italians are like, "What do you mean? It's fine." Like, what's he gonna do? Like, tell him that Dad's there when Dad just told him. So, it's funny. Lying it gets a little cultural. Now, of course, you cannot lie. You must love the truth and tell the truth. But it's just funny examples like that can kind of make you think about what does it mean to lie. Yeah.
What if you just avoid the truth, or try to go around it so you don't have to lie, but you're also not necessarily saying.
Well, there must be a very, very good reason that you would do that, and at that point, you probably got to give a specific example, but you need to tell the truth when the truth is asked of you. I mean, the classic example is like the Nazis knock at the door. Are there Jews in your attic? Right. That person knocking at the door does not have a right to the truth. Right? You know they're going to inflict evil. So, let's see, there's some specific language that helps that. Okay. Yeah. All right, sins against the eighth commandment. Lying, to speak or act against the truth in order to lead someone into error. Rash judgment, detraction or gossip, calumny or slander, flattery. Yeah, Dante, he's the Italian poet who wrote the Divine Comedy, and he has a special place in hell for flatterers, so just be careful with that one. Don't flatter people, tell the truth. Boasting and irony. Alright, so I think we all have one of those that we fall into, so work against it. But yeah, a love for the truth. Jesus says, I am the truth, and a lot of lying is kind of being afraid of the truth of things. And so we kind of tell lies and try to beat around the bush, but the truth is what makes us free at the end of the day. All right, so the 7th and the 10th. And I think we're probably getting close to our time. Maybe not. Oh, all right, we'll go 5 more minutes. It's 8:16. All right, sure you ladies for next time. All right, we'll go quick.
It's 8 what?
8:16.
All right, you're good.
All right, we're good. All right, stewardship of created goods. Yeah. So Pope Francis wrote an an encyclical Laudato Si a few years back, and when I think of stewardship of created goods, I think of his writings. He writes beautifully on our relationship to creation. And he says something like, every time you purchase something, it is a moral decision. It is an act which can be good or bad, you know. And I'm like, oh man, like sometimes you just buy stuff, you don't think that much about it, but it's true that we all are called to be stewards of creation, and I think more and more, like, we see this in Catholic circles as well, that we should care for creation, that we should be industrious, not waste things, and so, but the seventh commandment is about stealing, I believe. Forbids unjustly taking or keeping the goods of one's neighbor and wronging him with respect to his goods. Okay. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, says Jesus. And this is a pretty powerful quote from St. John Chrysostom. Pope Francis likes to quote this quote. Our money is the Lord's, however we may have gathered it. God allows us wealth, not for you to waste on drink, fancy food, expensive clothes, and all the other kinds of indolence, but for you to distribute to those in need. Not to share one's wealth with the poor is to steal from them. So, pretty powerful words. I think he was like, he always, St. John Chrysostom has like these homilies where he's like, stop wearing your gold earrings. Like, goes down and takes their gold earrings out. No, he does preach very, very harshly on wealth and, yeah, fancy food.
He was like preaching to a specific woman or something, I think.
And maybe that's the
an image there.
Yeah.
Well, I think she even like requested an audience with him or something.
Oh, really?
And she just hoarded her wealth and didn't care about anybody, so.
And so our relationship to created goods is something that God is concerned about, and that because it enters into our moral life. And so the church has this whole branch of Catholic social teaching, which is sort of the church making judgments on social realities, because the church says, look, these social conditions affect salvation, right? So when the Industrial Revolution happened and people were being basically underpaid, overworked, and they wanted to gather and make unions, right? The church sort of stepped in and said, like, yes, you can do that. And that's kind of how Catholic social teaching started after the Industrial Revolution. But now it's this whole branch of teachings, and you could say, what is Catholic social teaching? Like, it is like probably a bunch of documents which give direction. And if you read them, you sort of come to some principles, concerned with social reality. So, in the moral order, the church bears a mission, distinct from that of political authorities. The church is concerned with the temporal aspects of the common good, because they are ordered to the sovereign good, our ultimate end. Okay. So here are the principles: human dignity and human rights, solidarity, right, with each other and the common good, subsidiarity, which is the principle that the smallest body of government, which can govern well, should govern. So, for instance, parents should teach their kids about the faith, and not just send them off to like the public school or the private school and expect sort of that a larger branch to teach their children, right? So that's kind of a principle of subsidiarity. The lowest, the smallest governing body should accomplish what it can. Universal destination of goods, right? So if I'm starving and I come and I'm walking across a field